Inside of the onPost method, one way to tell if I should be updating a restaurant instead of adding a restaurant is to look at the restaurant ID property. If the restaurant ID is 0, assuming our database will never use an ID value of 0, we could say any restaurant with an ID value less than 1 or equal to 0, that must be a new restaurant that we need to add to the data source. Otherwise, if the restaurant has an ID, and that ID is greater than 0, then we need to update an existing restaurant. Now, before I implement this logic, I just want to point out that I first have to check if the model state is valid, and then I would have to check if the restaurant ID is greater than 0. And for me personally, I don't like to use nested if statements if I can avoid them. So I'm going to rewrite this method just a little bit. I'm going to take these bottom 2 lines of code, which are the lines that repopulate my cuisines property, and then tell ASP.NET Core to render the current page. I'm going to take them and paste them inside of my if statement, but then change my if statement to say if the model state is not valid. So if the model state is not valid, let's rebuild our cuisines and then show the form to the user again so they can fix any errors. Now let me take this logic and cut it out of the if statement and paste it below the if statement. So again, what I'm really just trying to do is avoid nested if statements. I'm still going to have some slightly messy logic because some people will not like to have multiple returns inside of a method, but we will work with this approach for now. But now I can add the if statement to say, okay, the model is valid, and now I need to check if the restaurant ID is greater than 0. Because if the restaurant ID is greater than 0, I want to update an existing restaurant. Otherwise, what I want to do is go to restaurant data and tell it to add a new restaurant. This is the type of logic that you might also place inside of your data layer somewhere, but we're going to have it in the Razor page. But regardless of which approach we use, we need to call commit to flush those changes into the real data source, and then we can still redirect to the detail page once we've successfully added a restaurant. Let's try this out. I'm going to save all the files. Let's come out to the browser and go back to the list of all restaurants. And then I want to say that I want to add a new restaurant. Let's add a restaurant, Mancini's. I could say this is in Stockholm, and the cuisine is Italian. Click Save, and I now have a new restaurant with an ID of 4. If I go to the list of all restaurants, that restaurant appears here. Of course, that's only going to stay here until the application resets again, but we'll fix that in the next module. And then there might be one additional nice feature to have. Once the user clicks the Save button, it might be nice to present a message here to make it very explicit that yes, you did just save some data. But that would again require me to pass along some information between 2 pages, from the edit page over here to the detail page. Let's look at how to do that next.